Little girl shows photo of mom to billionaire twins and says, "One of you is my dad." They are in shock. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains of the Blackwood mansion, creating golden stripes on the marble floor of the main hall. It was Tuesday, and like every Tuesday for the last 5 years, Landon and Nolan were having breakfast together in the dining room, reading their respective sections of the paper in a comfortable silence. The 32-year-old twins were practically identical. Dark brown hair, green eyes, and that confident posture that came from being born into wealth. The only visible difference was a small scar on Nolan's left eyebrow, the result of a childhood fight that Landon always blamed himself for causing. "The Asian market is in free fall," Nolan murmured, folding the business section. "Nothing we can't handle," Landon replied, stirring sugar into his coffee. "The meeting with the Japanese investors is tomorrow. We can—" A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Margaret, the housekeeper, appeared with a strange expression on her face, a mix of surprise and nervousness that Landon had never seen on the 60-year-old woman. "Gentlemen, there is a situation." "What kind of situation, Margaret?" Landon frowned. "A child, a little girl. She's at the front door and insists on speaking with you." The brothers exchanged confused glances. Children did not show up at the Blackwood mansion, ever. The estate was in an isolated area, far from parks or schools. "A child." Nolan stood up. "Where are her parents?" "She's alone, sir. Just with a small backpack." Margaret wrung her hands on her apron, a nervous gesture Landon had never witnessed. "Alone." Landon set the newspaper aside. "How did she get here?" "By bus, sir. She told me she took 2 buses." "Bring her in," Landon said. "Sir, perhaps it would be better." "Margaret." Nolan's voice cut through the air. "Bring the child." A few minutes later, small footsteps echoed in the hallway. Margaret appeared in the dining room entrance, holding the hand of a small girl, and the world stopped. The child couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Blonde hair, like golden threads, fell in loose curls over her shoulders, and her light blue eyes were enormous in a small, delicate face. She wore a simple, navy blue dress and clutched a pink backpack tightly. But it wasn't the girl's appearance that made Landon's heart pound. It was the familiar face he recognized instantly, even 5 years later, even in a miniature version. Isabel. The girl had Isabel's face, the same light blue eyes, the same delicate shape of her chin, the same determined expression. Beside him, Nolan made a low sound. He had seen it too. He had also recognized it. The girl looked from one brother to the other, studying every detail of their faces. Then, with careful movements, she opened the pink backpack and took out a crumpled photo. It was Isabel. Smiling in that photo, Landon remembered taking on a spring Sunday, back when he thought they had all the time in the world. The girl held the photo up in the air with 2 small hands. "One of you is my daddy." The words came out clear and direct, without hesitation. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret let out a low gasp. Nolan turned pale as paper. And Landon felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The coffee cup slipped from Nolan's fingers and shattered on the floor, spreading dark liquid across the marble. Nolan swallowed hard. What's your name?" "Ivy," she replied, lowering the photo but keeping her chin high. "Ivy Morrison. My mom is Isabel Morrison." Landon closed his eyes. "Morrison. Isabel's maiden name." "Isabel Morrison," Nolan repeated softly. "Yes, she worked here before I was born." Ivy put the photo back in her backpack. "She told me one of the Blackwood brothers is my daddy." The word daddy made Landon grip his chair. Ivy tilted her head. "You look the same. Are you twins?" "We are," Landon murmured. "That's cool." A small smile appeared on her face. "I always wanted a brother." The innocence of those words made something inside Landon's chest break. Nolan moved, walking around the table to crouch in front of Ivy. "Ivy," he began, "how do you know one of us is your father? Did your mother tell you?" "Not exactly." Ivy bit her lower lip. "I found the picture in her room. It was hidden in a little box. I asked who the men in the picture were. And what did she say? First she got sad. Then she said they were important people she worked with before I was born. But I insisted. Ivy lifted her chin. Mommy always says I'm stubborn, just like my dad. Then she sighed and told me. Told you what exactly? Landon's question came out urgent. That one of the Blackwood brothers is my daddy, but she didn't say which one. Ivy looked between the two men. Did you like my mommy? The question landed in the silence like a bomb. Nolan stood up abruptly and walked to the window, turning his back to everyone. Landon could see the tension in his shoulders. Isabel never said... Nolan started, his voice rough. She never mentioned that she was pregnant, Landon finished. No, she didn't. Not to me either, Nolan added, and there was pain in his voice. Ivy watched the exchange between the two with attentive eyes. Did you both like her? She insisted. It's complicated, Nolan murmured. High grown-ups always say that when they don't want to explain things right. Nolan let out a humorless laugh. You're smart, aren't you? Mommy says I take after my dad. Ivy shrugged. So, which one of you is it? The silence returned, heavier this time. Landon felt Nolan's gaze on him, felt the weight of years of secrets. Ivy, he said, can you wait here for just a little bit? I need to talk to my brother in private. Can I stay here alone? Margaret stepped forward. Of course not, dear. I'll stay with you. How about some hot chocolate and some fresh cookies? Ivy's eyes lit up. Can I? I love hot chocolate. I make the best hot chocolate in the city, Margaret said with a smile. Landon touched his brother's shoulder. Nolan, let's go to the study. In the study, with the door closed, the silence was deafening. Nolan stood with his back turned, looking out the window. You knew I liked her, he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. Tice, you always knew, and you got involved with her anyway. You betrayed me. Nolan? No. He turned, and there was fury in his green eyes. You let me play the fool. How many times did I talk about her? How many times did I ask your opinion on how to win her over? Landon took a deep breath. I was already with her when you told me you liked her. For how long? 3 months. 3 months, Nolan repeated the words as if testing their bitter taste. For 3 months, you let me dream about her, plan how I was going to win her over. I didn't know how to tell you the truth, Landon. That strange word that means being honest. I kept quiet because I didn't want to hurt you. You kept quiet because you were a coward. The accusation hit Landon like a slap, because it was true. Yes, he admitted, I was a coward. Nolan ran his hands through his hair. We never had secrets, he said, and now there was pain in his voice. Since we were born, we always told each other everything. You were my best friend, now you're just another stranger. Nolan, don't say that. Why not? It's the truth. Nolan grabbed his jacket. Congratulations, Landon. You got what you wanted. Isabel, a daughter. And you lost a brother in the process. She disappeared from my life too, Landon said desperately. I didn't know about Ivy. If you had known, would you have been honest with me? I doubt it. Nolan opened the door. I hope she's worth it, because she's all you have now. He left, and the sound of the door closing echoed through the study like a gunshot. Landon stood in the middle of the empty study, listening to Nolan's footsteps echo down the hall, then the front door slamming, then the sound of the car speeding away. When he returned to the dining room, he found Ivy sitting at the table, drinking hot chocolate. Margaret had placed a plate full of cookies in front of her. Did the other man leave? She asked when she saw him. Yes, he had to go, Landon said, sitting down next to her. Okay. Ivy shrugged and went back to her cookies. These are the best cookies I've ever had in my life. Margaret makes the best cookies in the city. Mommy left early today. I only had a banana for breakfast. Ivy drank more hot chocolate. The mention of Isabel made Landon focus. Ivy, he said, where do you live? 234 Flower Street, apartment 12. She recited it by heart. It's tiny, but Mommy says it's just ours, and that's important. And your mum is working right now. Uh-huh, at the big hotel near our house. She cleans and straightens the rooms. Ivy licked chocolate off her fingers. So she works a lot, leaves early and comes home late. And does she know you came here? Ivy stopped and looked down. No? How did you manage to leave by yourself? There's no school today because of a water main break. Mommy had already left. I thought it was a good opportunity to meet my daddy. The simple logic of a 5-year-old. When weren't you scared kid taking the bus alone? A little. But I've ridden the bus with Mommy lots of times. Ivy lifted her chin with pride. And I asked a lady where the Blackwood house was. You were very brave, but it was also dangerous. Mommy always says that, but I really wanted to meet my daddy. The word still made Landon's heart skip. Ivy, your mum. Does she talk about me, about us? Sometimes. Ivy took another cookie. When she gets sad looking at your picture, I ask why she's sad, and she says that important people sometimes leave our lives. Landon clenched his fists. Isabel had kept that photo for 5 years. And she never said why she left here. No. Just said that sometimes life changes and we have to adapt. Ivy tilted her head. Why did she leave? It's complicated, he said, and Ivy made a face. Again, Ivy finished her hot chocolate and stood up, walking to the window. Outside, dark clouds were beginning to form. It's going to rain, she said. Looks like it. Mommy says that after the rain, the flowers grow more beautiful. Landon joined her at the window. Your mom is right. Ivy was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him. Are you really my dad? Landon knelt to get on her eye level. I don't know. I need to find that out with your mom. But do you want to be? The question carried so much weight, so much hope. Yes, he said softly. Very much. Her blue eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then will you come home with me? If you want me to. I do. Mommy needs to meet you again. Margaret appeared with a small bag of wrapped cookies. For your mother, she said with a smile. Thank you, Miss Margaret. The girl's politeness made Landon feel proud. Isabel had raised a well-mannered daughter. Ready to go home? He asked. Ivy nodded, picking up her pink backpack. Ready. They left the mansion together, Ivy holding Landon's hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In the car, she was enchanted by everything. Mommy doesn't have a car, she commented. We take the bus everywhere. Do you like riding the bus? It's nice. You meet different people, but sometimes it takes a long time. As he drove through the city streets, following the directions Ivy gave, Landon thought about all the things he had missed. 5 years of his daughter's life. 5 years of Isabel struggling alone. You look thoughtful, Ivy said. I'm thinking about your mom. She's going to be surprised when she sees me with you. Probably. But she'll be happy too. She always looks sad when she looks at that picture. They arrived in the neighborhood where Isabel lived, a simple place, with low-rise buildings and narrow streets. It was completely different from the world Landon had grown up in. It's there. Ivy pointed to a small, well-kept building. Landon parked and looked at the building where his daughter had grown up. Ready? He asked. She nodded. Ready. And as they climbed the stairs to the second floor, Landon wondered if he was about to get back what he had lost 5 years ago, or if he was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had lost. The second-floor hallway was narrow and well lit, with walls painted a pale yellow that tried to hide the building's age. Landon followed Ivy up the wooden steps that creaked softly under his feet, each step echoing in the afternoon silence. This is it, Ivy said, stopping in front of a simple door with the number 12 painted in peeling blue paint. Landon looked at the door and took a deep breath. On the other side was Isabel, the woman who had disappeared from his life 5 years ago without a word, without an explanation, leaving only a void he had never managed to completely fill. Ivy searched her pink backpack and pulled out a small key hanging from a colorful lanyard. Mommy gave it to me for emergencies, she explained, inserting the key into the lock. Ivy, wait. Landon touched her shoulder gently. Maybe it's better to knock first. Your mum might get scared if we just walk in. But she only gets home at 6, Ivy said, frowning. She's working at the hotel. Even so, let's knock. Ivy shrugged and knocked on the door with her knuckles. Mommy, it's me. Silence. She knocked again, harder this time. Mommy! Then, from the other side of the door, came a sound that made Landon's heart stop. Quick footsteps approaching, followed by the voice he had dreamed of hearing again for 5 whole years. "Ivy, honey, is that you?" The door flew open, and there was Isabel. She was even more beautiful than Landon remembered, but there were changes that told the story of the years that had passed. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few loose strands framing a face that held the same delicacy, but now showed fine lines of exhaustion around her blue eyes. She wore a housekeeping uniform, a simple white blouse and dark pants, and her hands showed the hard work of the last few years. "Ivy, thank God!" Isabel knelt and pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "I came home early because I was worried. The school called saying you didn't show up, and when I got home you weren't here." It was then that she saw Landon standing behind Ivy, and the world stopped. Isabel turned pale as paper. Her hands trembled where they held her daughter's shoulders, and for a moment she looked like she might faint. "Hi, Isabel," Landon said softly. "No," she whispered, rising slowly, gently pushing Ivy behind her. "No, no, no. This can't be happening. Mommy." Ivy looked between the two adults, confusion growing on her face. "Do you know him?" Isabel didn't take her eyes off Landon. "Ivy, go inside, now." "But Mommy..." "Now, Ivy!" The unusual harshness in Isabel's voice made Ivy take a step back, her eyes filling with tears. Landon knelt to the girl's level. "It's okay, Princess," he said gently. "Your mum and I just need to talk. Can you go inside?" Ivy nodded, still confused, and disappeared inside the small apartment. Isabel and Landon were left alone in the hallway, 5 years of silence and hurt hanging between them like a heavy cloud. "How did you find me?" Isabel's voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. "Ivy came to the mansion this morning." "What?" Isabel put a hand to her chest. "Alone. Alone, with a backpack and that picture of us." Isabel closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. "Come in," she said finally, stepping away from the door. "We can't talk in the hallway." The apartment was small but cozy. The living room connected directly to a tiny kitchen, and Landon could see 2 doors, probably a bedroom and a bathroom. Everything was impeccably clean and organized, but it was obvious that every piece of furniture had been bought out of necessity, not luxury. Ivy was sitting on the small sofa, swinging her legs and watching the 2 adults with wide, curious eyes. "Ivy," Isabel said, her voice gentler now, "can you go play in your room for a bit? I need to talk with this gentleman here." "But I want to stay," Ivy protested. "He's..." "Room. Now." Ivy sighed dramatically but obeyed, disappearing behind one of the doors. Isabel waited until she heard the door close, then turned to Landon. She crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture he remembered from when she was nervous. "She found the picture and wanted to know," Isabel said quickly, as if the words burned in her throat. "I didn't send her. She did this on her own. I never asked her to go to you." "I know," Landon said softly. "She told me." "Then why are you here?" The question was loaded with years of pain. "Because I just found out I have a daughter," Landon answered, "and because the woman I loved disappeared from my life without a word of explanation." Isabel let out a bitter laugh. "The woman you loved?" "Yes." "Then why did you never come looking for me?" "Because I didn't know where you were." Landon's voice rose, frustration leaking through the words. "You just vanished, Isabel. One day you were there, the next you were gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. I couldn't what?" Landon took a step forward. "Couldn't tell me you were pregnant? Couldn't give me a chance to fight for you, for us?" Isabel turned her face away, tears shining in her eyes. "You don't understand. Then explain it to me, please." Landon lowered his voice, all the anger turning into a plea. "I've spent 5 years trying to understand why you left, why you never came back, why you never looked for me." Isabel walked to the small living room window, looking out at the street through the simple curtains. Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Your father threatened me," she said at last, without turning around. "What?" "Your father." She spoke each word slowly as if they were made of glass. "He found out about us, about our relationship. Landon felt the blood run cold in his veins. When? A few weeks before I left, he called me into his office. Isabel finally turned to look at Landon, and there was so much suffering in her eyes that he felt like breaking something. He said he knew everything, that he had been watching. Investigating, Isabel. He said I wasn't worthy of you, that I was just a maid trying to take advantage of the family. Her voice broke. He said, if I didn't leave the mansion immediately, he would end me, that he would destroy me in every way possible. Landon clenched his fists, feeling a fury build inside him like a storm. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. The words came out like a choked cry. He's your father, Landon. He has power, money, connections. I was just a 22-year-old girl with no family, no protection. What could I do against him? Isabel wiped her tears with the back of her hand. So I ran. I packed my things that night and left. I thought it was the right thing to do, that I was protecting both of us. And the pregnancy. The question came out hoarse. I found out a few weeks later. Isabel sat on the small sofa, as if her legs could no longer support her. I was working in a restaurant in another city. I started feeling sick, went to the doctor, and there she was. She looked toward the room where Ivy had disappeared. And you never thought about telling me. I thought about it. The admission came out softly. I thought about it every day, especially when she was born, and I saw her eyes. The same green eyes you have. But what? But I thought you had chosen his side. The words hit Landon like a slap. What do you mean? Isabel looked at her hands clasped in her lap. You never came looking for me, not once. I expected you to ask about me, to try to find me, but there was nothing. Total silence. Because I didn't know where to look. Landon knelt in front of her, trying to catch her eye. Isabel, look at me. I did look. I asked everyone. I hired a private investigator, but you had completely disappeared. I changed my name, she admitted. I went back to using Morrison. I moved to 3 different cities in the first 2 years. They were silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of all the misunderstandings, all the missed opportunities. So you thought I'd chosen my father, Landon said finally. He's your family, Landon. Your only family, and I was just the maid. You were never just the maid to me. Landon's voice was thick with emotion. You were everything. You still are. Isabel raised her eyes to meet his, and for a moment, time stopped. It was as if the 5 years had disappeared, and they were just Isabel and Landon again, in love and invincible. But then reality returned. How was it? Landon asked quietly. Raising Ivy alone. How did you manage? Isabel let out a humorless laugh. It wasn't easy. The first few years were hard. Day jobs, night jobs sometimes. Ivy stayed with babysitters when I could afford them, or alone when I couldn't. She looked at her own hands. It's not a life I wanted for her. Why did you never ask for help? From who? I have no family. I have no friends with money. And I wasn't going to beg. Landon felt a physical pain in his chest, imagining Isabel struggling alone, working herself to exhaustion to support her daughter, his daughter. She's incredible, he said. Ivy, she's smart, brave, polite. You did an amazing job. I tried. Isabel wiped away new tears. Even when it was hard, even when I was too tired to move, I tried to be the best mother I could be. And you succeeded. They fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts. From Ivy's room came muffled sounds, probably her playing, trying to pretend she wasn't trying to listen to the conversation. What do you want, Landon? Isabel's question came softly. Why are you really here? Landon stood and walked to the small window, looking at the street where children were playing on the sidewalk. I want to know my daughter, he said. I want to be in her life. I want to make up for the 5 years I lost. And what about your father? My father can go to hell. The vehemence in Landon's voice made Isabel look at him in surprise. Landon, no. He turned to look at her. What he did was unforgivable. You were right to be afraid of him, but I am not him, Isabel. I never was. I know. Her voice was just a whisper. Then why did you never come back? Even after Ivy was born, even after she was old enough to ask questions. Isabel stood up and walked over to where he stood. Because I was afraid you would reject me, that you would reject her. Her hands trembled. It was easier to imagine you wanted us than to find out you didn't. Landon reached out and touched her face gently, as if she were made of glass. I always wanted you, he said. Every single day of these 5 years, I wanted you back in my life. Isabel closed her eyes and leaned into his touch for a moment before pulling away. Things have changed, Landon. I've changed, you've changed, and now there's Ivy to think about. That's why I'm here, for her, for you, for us. There is no us, Isabel said, but her voice wasn't convincing. Isn't there? Before she could answer, the bedroom door opened and Ivy appeared, her blonde hair messy and holding a drawing in her hand. Sorry to interrupt, she said with the seriousness of an adult, but I made something. She held the drawing out to Landon. It was a simple drawing, made with crayons, 3 stick figures holding hands, a small one with yellow hair, a medium one with yellow hair, and a tall one with brown hair. It's us, Ivy explained. A family. Landon looked at the drawing, then at Ivy, then at Isabel, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he could get back everything he had lost, but he would have to fight for it, and this time, he wouldn't let anything or anyone, not even his own father, stand in the way. It's a beautiful drawing, Ivy, he said, crouching to her level. Can I keep it? Ivy nodded vigorously. Of course, families share everything. Landon looked at Isabel over Ivy's head, and he saw his own hopes reflected in her blue eyes. The Blackwood mansion had never felt so empty. Landon arrived home as the sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected off the enormous windows of the estate. Nolan's car wasn't in the driveway, an absence he noted immediately, but which didn't surprise him. Still, a part of him had hoped to find his brother in the living room, perhaps reading or watching television, ready for a difficult but necessary conversation. Instead, the silence greeted him like a physical weight on his shoulders. Mr. Landon! Margaret appeared in the hall, wiping her hands on her apron. How did the meeting go? Complicated, he replied, taking off his jacket. Is Nolan back? No, sir. He left right after you did and hasn't been back since. Landon nodded, trying to ignore the pang of worry in his chest. If he calls or shows up, please let me know. Of course, sir. Margaret disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Landon alone in the immense hall. His footsteps echoed on the marble as he walked to the living room, where the interrupted breakfast still left its marks. The broken cup had been cleaned up, but the table was still set for 2. He poured himself a whiskey and sat in the leather armchair that had always been his favorite, the one from which he could see the entire garden through the French doors. The liquid burned his throat, but it was a relief compared to the knot in his chest. The discovery of his fatherhood still felt unreal. All afternoon, talking with Isabel, seeing where she lived, understanding what her life had been like for the past 5 years, a part of him still couldn't fully process it. He was a father. He had a 5-year-old daughter who had grown up without him, who had taken her first steps, spoken her first words, learned to read, all without him even knowing she existed. Landon closed his eyes and tried to imagine how different it would have been if he had known from the beginning, if Isabel had trusted him enough to tell him about his father's threats, if he had been man enough to confront the old man from the start. But these thoughts always ran up against the same painful reality, the look on Nolan's face when the truth came out, the raw pain, the sense of betrayal, the shattering of a trust that had taken 32 years to build. He took out his phone and typed a quick message. Where are you? We need to talk. He sent it and waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15, no reply. He tried calling. The call went straight to voicemail, as if the phone was off or out of service. Landon drank more whiskey and got up, walking to the window. The garden was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, and he remembered all the times he and Nolan had played there as children. They were inseparable back then, 2 identical boys who shared everything. Toys, secrets, dreams, fears. When they started working at the family company at 22, they continued to be a perfect team. Nolan was better with numbers and strategy. Landon had an easier time with negotiations and relationships. They complemented each other naturally. dividing responsibilities without competition, always making important decisions together. They had never really fought. Small arguments, sure, all siblings had them, but never anything that threatened the fundamental core of their relationship. Until today, Landon could still see the look on Nolan's face when he found out the truth. It wasn't just anger or disappointment, it was pure devastation, as if something inside him had broken irreparably. "You were my best friend," Nolan had said. "Now you're just another stranger." The words echoed in Landon's mind like a painful refrain. Because it was true. He had betrayed his brother's trust. He had kept a secret he shouldn't have, had let Nolan make plans and dream about a woman who was already with someone else. He had been a coward, exactly as Nolan said. But the situation was more complex than Nolan's anger allowed him to see. Landon hadn't planned on getting involved with Isabel. It had happened gradually, naturally. Casual conversations in the garden turned into long walks. Walks turned into confidences. Confidences turned into something deeper. By the time he realized he was in love, it was already too late. And when Nolan came to him that night, eyes shining with hope, talking about how he had finally found the right woman, Landon had frozen. He should have told him right then. He should have been honest, even if it hurt. Instead, he had chosen the cowardly path of silence, thinking he could protect everyone, and ended up destroying everything. The phone vibrated in his hand, and for a moment his heart leaped. But it was just a work message. Something about the meeting with the Japanese investors that now seemed completely irrelevant. Landon tried calling Nolan again. Once more, voicemail. He walked to the office they shared. 2 large desks side by side, walls covered in diplomas and company photos, a small meeting area where they made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. Everything organized with the meticulous precision that was Nolan's trademark. His brother's desk was immaculate as always, every document in its place, every pen aligned. But something was different. A few personal items were missing, the photo of the 2 of them at graduation, the paperweight Landon had given him for his birthday years ago, the small cactus Nolan kept near his monitor. A chill ran down Landon's spine. Nolan had taken his things. This wasn't just a momentary fit of anger, it was a calculated decision. He went back to the living room and poured himself another whiskey, this one more generous than the last. The loneliness of the mansion seemed to press in on him from all sides. For the first time in years, he realized how large the house was, how many rooms were rarely used, how the silence echoed through the halls. He and Nolan had lived together forever. Even when they went to university, they chose the same dorm. After graduation, when they inherited the mansion, there was never any discussion about separating. It was natural that they would continue to share the space, the responsibilities, the decisions. Now, for the first time in 32 years, Landon was genuinely alone. The irony was that he had discovered he had a daughter on the same day he lost a brother. Emotional life and death happening simultaneously, as if the universe was maintaining some kind of cruel balance. He thought of Isabel, of how she had seemed when he left. Cautious, but less hostile than at the start of the conversation. There was hope there, buried under layers of pain and mistrust, but present nonetheless. Maybe they could rebuild something. Maybe they could be a family, but that would mean leaving Nolan even further behind. And the guilt of that realization was almost unbearable. Landon drank the whiskey and tried one more call. This time, the phone rang a few times before going to voicemail, a small bit of progress that filled him with desperate hope. "Nolan, it's me," he said to the recording. "I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but you're my brother. You'll always be my brother. Don't let this completely destroy our relationship, please." He hung up and waited, staring at the phone as if he could force it to ring through sheer willpower. Nothing. Night had fallen completely now, turning the enormous windows into dark mirrors that reflected his lonely image in the lit room. Landon saw himself multiplied in the glass, a 32-year-old man sitting alone in a mansion, holding a glass of whiskey, waiting for a phone call that might never come. He had discovered he was a father. He had found the woman he loved, and he had lost the only person who had always been by his side. The price of love, he thought bitterly, was sometimes higher than a person could pay. But looking at his reflection in the dark windows, Landon made a decision. He would fight for Isabel and Ivy, yes, but he would also fight for Nolan, because family, true family, doesn't give up easily, even when all seems lost, even when the silence of the empty mansion seems absolute, even when the phone stubbornly refuses to ring. 2 weeks had passed since the day Ivy showed up at the Blackwood mansion, and Landon had established a routine he had never imagined possible. Every morning at 7:30, he would knock on the door of apartment 12 on Flower Street. Not with flowers or elaborate gifts that a child wouldn't know how to receive, but simply with his presence. Isabel would open the door, reluctant at first, then gradually more receptive, and he would enter the small kitchen where Ivy was eating breakfast. "Good morning, Princess," he'd say, sitting in the plastic chair that creaked under his weight. "Good morning," Ivy would reply, chewing on cereal or toast, her blonde hair still messy from sleep. He didn't promise to be the best father in the world. He didn't swear eternal love or make grand declarations. He was simply there, present, filling the space a father was supposed to fill. On the first day, Ivy had been cautious, watching his every move like a small wild animal, assessing if this human was safe. On the second day, she had let him help her brush her teeth. On the third, she had asked him to tie her shoes. Small gestures, small victories. Landon discovered that being a father wasn't about big heroic moments or inspiring speeches. It was about remembering that Ivy liked pulp-free orange juice, that she always forgot to put her backpack in the right place, that she was afraid of thunder but loved the rain. "Can you take me to school today?" she asked on a Thursday, stirring her cereal in the bowl. "If your mum says it's okay," Landon replied, looking at Isabel, who was preparing lunch at the small sink. Isabel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You can." It was the first time she had trusted him completely with Ivy, and Landon felt the weight of the responsibility as an honor. The school was 3 blocks away. Ivy held his hand the entire way, chattering about her teacher, her classmates, the science project about plants she was doing. "Can you help me with the project?" she asked, stopping in front of the school gate. "Of course. What do you need to do?" "Plant a bean seed and watch it grow. But I don't know how. I'll teach you this afternoon." Ivy smiled, a smile that made something inside Landon's chest warm up. "Promise." Landon hesitated. Promises were dangerous. Promises could be broken, and children remembered broken promises forever. "I'll try very hard," he said honestly. "Okay." And she walked into the school without looking back, confident that he would be there when she got out. That afternoon, they planted bean seeds in small plastic cups on the tiny apartment balcony. Landon didn't know much about gardening. At the mansion, professional gardeners took care of everything. But he and Ivy figured it out together through trial and error. "How too much water kills the plant," he explained, remembering something he had read. "Like people?" Ivy asked, always curious. "Like people how? Does too much love kill people?" The question caught Landon off guard. Ivy had this ability to ask questions that cut right to the center of complicated things. "No," he said carefully, "love never kills people. But sometimes people don't know how to give love the right way." Ivy nodded seriously, as if that made perfect sense. "My mommy gives love the right way," she said. "She works really hard to take care of me." "Your mom is amazing," Landon agreed, and it was true. Watching Isabel over these 2 weeks, he had seen a strength he hadn't known 5 years ago. She had become a woman who knew exactly what she needed to do to protect her daughter, who worked tirelessly to give Ivy the best life possible with the limited resources she had. Isabel watched them from the small kitchen, pretending to wash dishes but clearly paying attention to every word, every gesture. Landon could feel her eyes on him, evaluating, testing, checking if he was worthy of the trust Ivy was placing in him. The following week, Ivy brought home a drawing from school, a family of stick figures again, but this time more elaborate. There was a house with windows, a smiling sun in the corner, flowers in the yard. "This is you," she said, pointing to the tallest figure. "This is me, this is Mommy, and this is our house." "It's beautiful," Landon said, studying the drawing. "Can I hang it on the fridge?" "Of course, that's what families do, right? They hang kids' drawings on the fridge." Landon looked at Isabel, who was drying her hands on a kitchen towel. There was something on her face he couldn't decipher. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. That's exactly right, he agreed, sticking the drawing to the small refrigerator with a butterfly-shaped magnet. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks created a rhythm. Landon took Ivy to school 3 times a week. He helped with homework every afternoon. They had dinner together, simple food that Isabel cooked on the small stove, but that tasted like home in a way the elaborate meals at the mansion never had. On Saturdays, they took walks in the nearby park. Ivy always found things to show him, interesting rocks, different flowers, dogs she wanted to pet. Landon learned to see the world through her eyes, full of small wonders and endless possibilities. "Look," she said one Saturday, pointing to 2 birds in a tree. "They're talking." "What do you think they're talking about?" "About where to build their nest. The mommy bird wants it on a high branch, but the daddy bird thinks it's too much work to carry twigs all the way up there." Landon laughed. "How do you know that?" "Because I paid attention." Ivy said it like it was obvious. If you pay attention to things, they always have a story. It was a lesson Landon was learning every day. Pay attention. Be present. Notice the small details that made all the difference, like how Ivy always tied her left shoe first, then her right. How she hummed softly when she was concentrating on something. How she held her crayon in a funny way when she drew, her tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth. Like how Isabel smiled in a different way now, not the polite, cautious smile of the first few weeks, but something more genuine, more relaxed. "You've changed," Isabel said one Thursday night, after Ivy had gone to sleep. They were sitting in the small living room, drinking tea. It was the first time they had been alone since the afternoon he had shown up at her door. "Oh, how so?" "Before that, you always seemed to be thinking about other things. Even when you were with me, part of you was somewhere else." Isabel stirred her tea slowly. "Now you're present. Completely present." Landon thought about that. "Ivy taught me to pay attention," he said finally. "She has that ability, to make people stop and pay attention to what really matters." "I never thought this would work out," Isabel admitted, looking toward the room where Ivy slept. "When you showed up here, I thought it was a phase, that you'd get tired of playing dad and disappear. And now," Isabel looked him directly in the eyes, "now I see that you really want to be a father. Not because it's what you're supposed to do, or because you feel guilty, but because you love her." The words hit Landon in the chest like a direct arrow. "I do love her," he said softly. "I didn't know it was possible to love someone so quickly, so completely. It's like that with children," Isabel said gently. "They come into your life and change everything instantly." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. "Isabel," Landon said finally, "I never forgot you, not for one day, and now I also need to fix things with my brother." Isabel tilted her head. "Nolan still hasn't come home." "No, and he's not answering my calls. I hurt him deeply, and I don't know how to fix it." "What you two had was special," Isabel said. "I remember how close you were, always united, always supporting each other." "We are. Then maybe it's worth fighting for, just like you fought for us." Landon looked at her, seeing something in her face that wasn't there in the first weeks. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. "Do you think there's a chance? For us, I mean..." Isabel hesitated, then smiled, the first truly open smile she had given him since he reappeared in her life. "I think you've changed, and I've changed too. Maybe we can find out who we are now, together." From Ivy's room came a low sound, her talking in her sleep, probably dreaming of some adventure. "She's a loud dreamer," Landon commented. "Always has been, since she was a baby." Isabel smiled. "Sometimes I stay awake just listening, trying to figure out what's happening in her dreams." "And what do you think she dreams about?" "Good things, family, adventures, a future where she has everything she needs." Landon reached out and gently touched Isabel's hand. "She will," he said. "We'll give it to her." Isabel didn't pull her hand away. "I'd like to believe that. Then believe it." And for the first time in 5 years, Isabel allowed hope to fully bloom in her chest. Because the man sitting next to her was no longer the 27-year-old he had been. He was someone who had learned that loving meant showing up every day, that being a father meant being present in the small moments, that family was built not on grand promises, but on quiet consistency. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, creating a peaceful symphony against the small apartment windows. And inside the small living room, 3 people who had been lost and found began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be a real family. Trust, Landon discovered, wasn't built with words, it was built with presence, with small acts of care repeated day after day, until they became as natural as breathing. And for the first time since Ivy appeared at the mansion door, he felt that maybe he knew how to be the father she deserved. It took Landon 3 weeks to find Nolan, not for lack of trying. He had called every day, sent messages, even hired a private investigator to track his brother's credit card. Nolan was staying at a hotel downtown, a discreet place, far from the social circles they frequented, far from anywhere he might be found by chance. When Landon finally decided to go there, it wasn't out of desperation or impatience. It was because he was tired. Tired of the guilt he carried like a physical weight on his shoulders, tired of looking at Nolan's empty room every morning, tired of explaining to Ivy why the other man in the picture never showed up. The Grandview Hotel was an old building downtown, with worn carpets and furniture that had been elegant decades ago. Landon knew the manager. They had gone to university together, and got the room number without much difficulty. Room 847, 8th floor. The elevator climbed slowly, stopping on every floor as if to give Landon time to change his mind. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, he took a deep breath before stepping out. The hallway was quiet, just the distant sound of traffic below filtering through the windows at the end of the hall. Landon walked slowly to door 847, each step echoing on the thin carpet. He stopped in front of the door and hesitated. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know if Nolan would even open the door when he heard his voice. He didn't know if the right words existed to fix what he had broken. But he knocked anyway. "Nolan," he said softly, close to the door. "It's me." Silence. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." More silence. Then, slow footsteps approaching the door. "Go away, Landon." Nolan's voice came muffled through the wood, but Landon could hear the exhaustion in it. The same exhaustion he felt himself. "I won't. I'm going to stay right here until you listen to me." "There's nothing to listen to." "Yes, there is. There's a lot." Silence again. Landon leaned his forehead against the cool door. "Nolan, please. You're my brother." "Am I?" The question was loaded with pain, and Landon felt his chest tighten. "You always have been. You always will be." The footsteps moved away from the door, and for a moment Landon thought Nolan had given up on the conversation. But then he heard the sound of the lock being undone. The door opened slowly, revealing Nolan on the other side. Landon was startled. His brother was visibly thinner, with stubble on his face and tired eyes. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, clothes Landon had never seen him wear, so different from the immaculate suits that were his trademark. "You look terrible," Landon said. "Thanks. You too." It was true. Landon hadn't slept well in weeks, and it showed on his face. Nolan stepped away from the door, leaving space for Landon to enter. The room was small and basic, a single bed, a small desk, a worn armchair near the window. There were clothes scattered about, books piled on the nightstand, a room service tray forgotten on the desk. "Temporary housing," Nolan said, noticing Landon's gaze, "until I decide what to do with my life. Your life is at the company." "With us? With us?" Nolan let out a humorless laugh. "There is no us anymore, Landon. You made that perfectly clear." Landon closed the door behind him and walked to the center of the small room. "I screwed up," he said. "I know that. I know I hurt you in a way that might be unforgivable." Nolan sat in the armchair by the window, avoiding his brother's gaze. "It's not just that you were with her," he said softly. "It's that you lied. For months you let me believe I had a chance, let me make plans, dream of a future that never existed. I didn't know how to tell you. The truth, Landon. You just had to tell the truth. And hurt you. You hurt me anyway. Nolan's voice rose. Only you made it worse. You made me look like an idiot. Landon approached the armchair but didn't sit. You're right, I was a coward. I chose the easiest path for me and the most painful one for you. And now what? What do you want? For me to say it's all okay? That we can go back to how we were before? No, Landon said honestly. I know we can't go back to how we were. But maybe we can be something new. Nolan looked at him for the first time since he had opened the door. New how? Landon took a deep breath. I have a daughter, Nolan. An amazing 5-year-old girl who draws families on the fridge and plants bean seeds in plastic cups. His voice softened. And she has an uncle who should meet her. Uncle, Nolan repeated quietly. You always said you wanted kids. Here's your chance to be important in a child's life. Nolan got up from the armchair and walked to the window, looking at the busy street below. Does she look like Isabel? She's her spitting image, but she has your eyes, our eyes. And is she definitely your daughter? Yes, there's no doubt. Nolan was silent for a long moment, processing the information. What's she like? The girl. Smart, curious, brave like her mother, but with a sweet demeanor that's all her own. Landon smiled, even though he knew Nolan couldn't see it. She asks questions that make me stop and think, like she sees the world in a way I never considered. And Isabel is cautious, but willing to try again. We're all trying to figure out how to be a family. Nolan turned from the window. All of you. You're part of this family, Nolan. You always have been. Even now, even with everything that's happened, you're still a part of it. I don't know if I can forgive you. The brutal honesty of the words hit Landon in the chest, but he nodded. I understand. But can you try? Nolan returned to the armchair and sat down heavily. Why does she matter so much to you, the girl? You've only known her for a few weeks. Because she's my daughter, and because... Landon paused, searching for the right words. Because when I look at her, I see all the possibilities in the world. I see a chance to be better than I am, to be the man I should have been for you, for Isabel, for myself. And you think I should help with that? After what you did... Landon knelt in front of the armchair, forcing Nolan to look at him. I know I hurt you, but you're still my brother, and now you're also her uncle. Can we rebuild this together? Nolan looked at him for a long moment, and Landon saw years of hurt, anger, love, and loss pass over the face identical to his own. You're the father, Nolan said finally. Choice, but that doesn't erase what happened. Landon nodded, understanding. It's just... Nolan took a deep breath. I don't want to keep hating you. I want to be part of her life too. The words came out hesitant, but loaded with determination. Landon felt his eyes fill with tears of relief. Thank you. It's not going to be easy, Nolan warned. It's going to take a long time for me to trust you again. It might never be like it was before. I understand. And I want to really get to know her. To know who she is, what she likes, how she thinks. Her name is Ivy, Landon said softly. Ivy, Nolan repeated, testing the sound. And does she know I exist? She remembers the day she showed up at the mansion. She asks about the other man who was there sometimes. Nolan rose from the armchair, and Landon stood up too. For a moment, they stood face to face in the small room, 32 years of shared history weighing between them. Then Nolan opened his arms. The hug was hesitant at first, loaded with pain and caution. But it gradually strengthened, turning into something that carried not just forgiveness, but hope. We still have a lot of work to do, Nolan murmured into Landon's shoulder. I know. And I'm not going to forget what happened. I don't expect you to. They separated but remained close. There was something different in the air now. Not the easy intimacy of before, but something new. More fragile, perhaps, but also more honest. She needs to have an uncle in her life, Landon said finally. She will, Nolan replied. And we'll figure out how to make this work. It was a small promise, but it carried the weight of a reconciliation that neither of them had thought possible a few hours earlier. Wounded but willing, cautious but hopeful. And for the first time in weeks, the Blackwood brothers began to believe that maybe they could be a family again, different but still real. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Landon was having breakfast with Ivy in the small apartment on Flower Street. She was talking about a school project, something about farm animals, when his phone rang. Landon, his father's voice came dryly through the line, without any preamble or courtesy. My office. 1 hour. Dad, 1 hour. The line went dead. Ivy looked at him with curiosity. Who was that? My father, Landon replied, putting the phone away. He wants to see me. Grandpa, Ivy's eyes lit up. Can I meet Grandpa? The innocence of the question made Landon's stomach turn. She didn't know. She had no idea that the man she wanted to meet as her grandfather was the one responsible for keeping them apart for 5 years. Not today, Princess, he said gently. Today is just a grown-up conversation. Isabel, who was at the sink washing breakfast dishes, looked at him over her shoulder. There was worry in her eyes. She also knew what that call meant. "Oh, do you have to go?" she asked quietly. "Yes, but we'll talk about what he says afterward." An hour later, Landon was standing in front of the Blackwood Industries building, looking up at the 30 stories of glass and steel that represented 3 generations of family work. His great-grandfather had started with a small import company. His grandfather had expanded into real estate. His father had turned it all into an empire. And now Landon knew he was about to choose between that empire and his own family. His father's office was on the top floor, with enormous windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Landon had grown up coming to this office, playing on the Persian rug while his father worked, dreaming of the day he would have his own desk there. The secretary, a different woman from the one who worked there 5 years ago, Landon noted, announced him over the intercom. "You can go in," came the authoritative voice from inside. Robert Blackwood was sitting behind his immense desk, exactly as Landon remembered him. At 65, he was still an imposing man, perfectly combed grey hair, bespoke suit, an upright posture that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. But there was something different in his eyes now, a coldness that wasn't there when Landon was a child. "Sit down," Robert said, without looking up from the papers in front of him. Landon remained standing. "I'd rather stand." Robert finally looked up, and his gaze was sharp. "Then let's get straight to the point." He leaned back in his leather chair. "Are you going to destroy our family name over an illegitimate child?" The question was loaded with disdain, and Landon felt anger rise in his chest like a flame. "Choose your words carefully," he said, his voice low but dangerous. "Why? That's what she is, isn't it? The product of a fling with a maid." Robert stood up, walking to the window. "Do you think I don't know what's going on? Do you think I don't have eyes and ears in this city? So you know. I know you're playing house with that woman and her daughter. I know you're practically living in their apartment. I know Nolan came back home yesterday, which means you've reconciled." Robert turned to look at his son. "What I don't know is why you're determined to tarnish our reputation." Landon took a step forward. "Our reputation. Blackwood Industries is more than a company, Landon. It's a legacy. It's a name that means something in this city. And you're willing to throw all that away for a fantasy of a happy family." "It's not a fantasy. It's my family." "Your family is me, Nolan, and this company." Robert's voice rose an octave. "That woman and that child they are complications. Distractions." Landon felt something inside him break. Not from sadness, but from absolute clarity. "Complications," he repeated slowly. "Is that how you see my daughter? Your supposed daughter? There's no supposed anything. Ivy is my daughter, and Isabel is the woman I love." Robert moved back behind his desk, resting his hands on the polished mahogany surface. "Love." He said the word as if it was something dirty. "You're 32 years old, Landon. It's past time you learned that love doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't build empires. It doesn't protect families." "What family?" "The family you destroyed when you threatened Isabel." Robert didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. "I did what was necessary to protect our interests." Our interests, Landon laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Who are you to talk about principles, father? What did you say? Landon approached the desk, placing his own hands on the surface and leaning forward. I know you had an affair with your secretary, Amanda, for months, while Mom was sick. Robert turned pale. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I was 16, not blind. I saw how you looked at her. I saw the late-night calls, the sudden business trips. Landon's voice was heavy with years of repressed pain. Mom died of sadness. Dad, she died knowing her husband was with another woman. Your mother died of cancer. Mom died of a broken heart. The cancer just finished what you started. The silence in the office was absolute. Outside the windows, the city continued its frantic pace, but within those four walls, time seemed to have stopped. That's different, Robert said finally. Is it? How? I never abandoned my family. I never abandoned my responsibility. Responsibility. Landon straightened up. Is that what I am to you? A responsibility? You are my son, my heir. You have obligations. And what if I choose my own obligations? Then you are no son of mine. The words hung in the air like a blade. Landon looked at the man who had raised him, who had taught him about business and responsibility, who had been his standard for strength and authority his entire life. And he saw a stranger. I choose my daughter, he said with a calm that surprised him. Not your reputation. Robert sat down slowly in his chair. If you walk out that door now, there's no coming back. I know. You will be cut off from the company, from the will, from everything. I understand. And Nolan will get everything. Nolan deserves everything. He was always better than me anyway. Robert looked at his son as if he were a stranger. You're really going to throw it all away? Landon walked to the door but stopped with his hand on the knob. I'm not throwing anything away, Dad. I'm choosing what really matters. And what matters? A woman who ran away from you. A child you don't even know. Landon turned around one last time. Love, real family, the chance to be a better man than my father was. He opened the door and left. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. Every step down the marble hallway, every second in the elevator, every foot to the building's exit was a confirmation of the choice he had made. On the street, standing on the busy sidewalk, Landon looked one last time at the Blackwood Industries building. 32 years of history, 3 generations of work, a future that had been planned for him since birth, all left behind. He took out his phone and called Isabel. Hi, she said, and he could hear Ivy humming in the background. Hi, can I come home? Home. There, with you, if you'll have me. There was a pause, and then Isabel said softly, the door is always open. Landon smiled for the first time in hours. I'm on my way. And he walked in the direction of Flower Street, in the direction of the only family that truly mattered. He would never go back to the office on the 30th floor. He would never again answer Robert Blackwood's summons. He had chosen love over legacy, and for the first time in his life, he felt he was on the right path. The house was nothing like the Blackwood mansion. It was simple. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2 small living rooms. But it had a front porch with white columns that begged for a rocking chair, and a backyard with a tree big enough for a treehouse. The walls needed a new coat of paint, the hardwood floors creaked in places, and the kitchen was half the size of the mansion's pantry. But when Landon watched the real estate agent open the front door and the afternoon light stream in through the windows, creating golden patterns on the floor, he knew he had found what he was looking for. How old is the house? He asked, walking through the small living room. Built in 1952, the agent replied, checking his notes. The previous family lived here for 40 years, took good care of it, as you can see. Landon nodded, but he wasn't really listening. He was picturing Ivy running through the room, leaving toys scattered in the corners. He was picturing Isabel in the small kitchen, making breakfast while he read the paper at the round table that would fit perfectly near the window. There's a small workshop in the basement, the agent continued, and the yard is fenced, great for kids. I'll take it, Landon said. The agent blinked, surprised. You don't want to see the rest? The second floor, the attic. No need. How much? 3 weeks later, Landon was standing on the porch of the house, holding 2 golden keys in his hands. One for him, one for Isabel. If she wanted it, he had spent the last few weeks organizing his new life. He opened a small business consulting firm, nothing grand, just him and a rented office downtown. A few former clients from Blackwood Industries had already expressed interest in his services. It wouldn't be the luxurious life he had known, but it would be honest. And it would be his. Nolan had returned to the mansion, taking over the company almost seamlessly. "Someone has to keep the business running," he had said with an ironic smile. "And apparently, I'm the responsible son now." They had eaten lunch together 3 times the previous week, meetings that were still a bit awkward, still loaded with caution, but with genuine moments of connection. The healing process would be long, but it had truly begun. Robert Blackwood had not tried to contact him once. Landon had heard through mutual acquaintances that the old man was furious, but he also knew that pride would prevent any attempt at reconciliation. It was a price Landon was willing to pay. Now, standing on the porch of the new house, Landon took out his phone and called Isabel. "Hi," she said, and he could hear Ivy in the background singing some school song. "Hi. Can you two come to Maple Street, number 247? Why? Trust me. Landon, you're scaring me. It's a good surprise. I promise." There was hesitation in Isabel's voice when she replied, "Okay, we'll be there." An hour later, Isabel's small, used car pulled up in front of the house. Landon was waiting for them on the porch, as nervous as a teenager before a first date. He had rehearsed what to say, but now that the moment had arrived, all the words seemed inadequate. Ivy ran out of the car and stopped in the middle of the front yard, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched. "What a beautiful house," she exclaimed. "Is this where you're going to live now?" "That depends," Landon replied, looking at Isabel, who was getting out of the car slowly, observing the house with cautious and confused eyes. "Depends on what?" "On whether you two want to live here with me." The silence that followed was total. Ivy stopped spinning and looked at him with wide eyes. Isabel stood motionless by the car, as if the words hadn't reached her. "Really?" Ivy asked finally. "Really?" "Mommy!" Ivy ran to Isabel and pulled her hand. "He wants us to live in the beautiful house. Can we? Please?" Isabel looked from her daughter to Landon, then to the house with its cozy windows and inviting porch. Her expression was a mixture of surprise, hope, and terror. "Landon," she began. "I know it's a lot," he said, walking down the porch steps slowly. "I know you're afraid of being disappointed again. I know we still have a lot to work out between us. Landon, but I bought this house thinking of the 3 of us, of Ivy having a yard to play in, a tree to climb, of you having a garden if you want to plant something, of us having a place that's truly ours, built the way we want it." Isabel shook her head slowly, but Landon noticed she was smiling. "You bought a house. I bought a house, without asking me, without asking you. That's completely crazy. Completely." Ivy looked between the 2 adults, as if she were watching a very slow and important tennis match. "Mommy," she said finally, "you're smiling. Does that mean you want to?" Isabel looked at her daughter, then at Landon, then back at the house. "Can I see inside first?" "Of course, in fact, I was counting on it." They took the tour slowly. Isabel touched the kitchen countertops, tested the faucets, opened and closed the cabinets. She asked practical questions about plumbing and electricity. She measured spaces with her eyes. Landon watched her, trying to decipher her expressions. In the small living room, there was a fireplace that needed repairs but promised cozy nights in the winter. In the dining room, a small round table that fit exactly 4 people, perfect for a family that was still figuring itself out. In the room that would be Ivy's, there was a large window that looked out onto the backyard tree. Can I have a treehouse?" Ivy asked, her nose pressed against the glass. "If your mom says yes," Landon replied. "And if you learn to use a saw without cutting your fingers off," Isabel added, but she was smiling when she said it. The master bedroom was at the front of the house, with 2 windows overlooking the street. It was a simple room, with a built-in closet and enough space for a queen-sized bed and a dresser. Isabel stood in the middle of the room, spinning slowly, taking in every detail. "It's different," she said softly. "It is," Landon agreed. "Very different." Are you going to miss it? The mansion, the company, the life you had. Landon leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore the space. I already miss some things. Margaret made incredible coffee. The shower in my room had perfect pressure. I never had to worry if the electric bill would fit in the budget. He paused. But I don't miss the loneliness. I don't miss waking up in a huge-ass empty room, eating breakfast at a table for 12 with only my brother for company. Isabel moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street where a few children were playing on the sidewalk. What if it doesn't work? What if we find out we don't know how to be a real family? Then we learn together. And what if I don't know how to trust completely again? Then you teach me how to earn your trust, day after day, until I get it right. And what if Ivy gets tired of having a dad after it being just the two of us for so long? Landon moved closer to her at the window. Isabel, stop. Stop inventing problems that might never happen. He touched her arm gently. The only question that really matters is, do you want to try? Isabel was silent for a long moment, looking at the street where neighbors watered small gardens, where life happened in a simple or real way. I do, she said finally, turning to look him in the eyes. I want to try. Even knowing I'm not perfect, that I'll mess up, I'll disappoint you sometimes, I'll have bad days. Even so. Even knowing our life is going to be very different from what either of us has ever lived. Especially because of that. Landon smiled and took the extra key from his pocket, a simple golden key he had made especially for this moment. So, he said, holding the key out to her, I'm not perfect, but I want to try. Will we be a family? Isabel took the key, her fingers lingering over his in the process. We will. From downstairs came a shriek of pure joy. Ivy had heard everything from the foot of the stairs, where she was obviously eavesdropping. Daddy! Mommy! Can I pick the color for my room? You can, they both shouted back. And then they were laughing, and Ivy was running up the stairs to throw herself into both of their arms. In the following days, the house quickly transformed from an empty structure into a real home. Isabel brought her plants from the small apartment balcony and spread them throughout the new house, creating green corners full of life. Ivy turned the backyard into her personal park, climbing the tree with the natural agility of children, discovering every corner and possibility of the new space. Landon discovered he liked to cook, nothing elaborate like the mansion chefs made, but simple, honest meals they ate at the small kitchen table, talking about the small details of the day. He discovered he liked washing dishes with Isabel after dinner, the casual conversations while they dried plates. He discovered he liked reading stories to Ivy before bed, sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her eyes slowly close. At night, after Ivy was asleep, he and Isabel would sit on the porch, drinking tea and planning small improvements for the house. A new fence for more privacy, a flower bed by the entrance, as maybe a small vegetable garden in the back. Simple conversations that built intimacy slowly, brick by brick. Nolan called today, Isabel said one Thursday night, rocking gently in the rocking chair they had bought the week before. He did. He called you. To ask if he could come for dinner on Saturday. Said he wanted to get to know Ivy properly this time, not as the key other strange man she remembers from the mansion. Landon smiled, feeling something warm in his chest. What did you tell him? That he's always welcome, that he's part of our family. On Saturday, Nolan arrived with a nice doll for Ivy and a bouquet of sunflowers for Isabel. He was visibly nervous. Landon could see it in the way he fidgeted with his hands and checked his reflection in the window. But Ivy, with the magical ease children have for breaking adult tensions, won him over in a matter of minutes. You look just like Daddy, she said, studying his face with the intensity of a scientist. Sois, but your eyes are different. Different how? Nolan asked, crouching to her level. Daddy's eyes look happy when he looks at me and Mommy. Yours look curious, like you want to know everything about me. Nolan laughed, the first genuine, carefree laugh Landon had heard from him in months. Curious is a perfect word. I am very curious about you, Ivy. Want to see my tree? I already made it to the highest branch. I'd love to. And so it began. Nolan became a constant presence at the house on Maple Street, but always a respectful one, always aware that this was not his primary space. He'd show up on weekends to help with small repairs. He fixed the dripping kitchen faucet, installed shelves in Ivy's room, painted the backyard fence. He took Ivy to the park when Landon and Isabel needed time alone for adult conversations or simply to rediscover each other. He taught Ivy how to play chess at the living room table with an infinite patience that surprised everyone. He told elaborate bedtime stories when he stayed for dinner, creating fantastic adventures with brave princesses who always looked suspiciously like Ivy. "She's good at this," he commented one Sunday, after Ivy had beaten him for the fourth consecutive time in chess. "She's good at anything that requires strategy," Isabel said, bringing fresh lemonade for everyone, just like her father. "And her uncle," Landon added, and the smile Nolan gave in return was worth all the difficult months they had been through. The weeks turned into months. The house gained a unique personality. Ivy's drawings covering the entire refrigerator, Isabel's books in neat piles around the house, Landon's tools carefully arranged in the small basement workshop. Nolan had his own coffee mug, one Ivy had picked out especially for him at a gift shop, with black cats on it. "Why cats?" he had asked the day he received the mug. "Yeah, because you're quiet and you watch everything before you talk, and because cats are independent but they like affection. Just like you." The observation had made them all laugh, but it was true. Nolan had become the quiet but deeply present uncle, always available when they needed him, always respectful of the boundaries and rhythms of the new family that was forming. They developed their own traditions. Pancake Sundays were sacred. Ivy mixed the batter, Isabel handled the skillet, Landon prepared fruit, and Nolan was responsible for the fresh orange juice. Friday nights became movie nights. Everyone piled onto the small living room sofa, with homemade popcorn and scattered blankets. On an October night, when the leaves of the backyard tree were golden and red, and the air had that pleasant chill that called for blankets and hot chocolate, the family was gathered in the small living room. Landon was reading the paper in an armchair. Isabel was sewing a button on Ivy's shirt. Nolan was helping the girl with a complicated school diorama, and the television was on quietly in the background. It was a completely ordinary scene, completely mundane, and completely perfect. "Daddy," Ivy said suddenly, looking up from the diorama. "Are you really happy?" The question caught Landon completely off guard. "I am very happy. Why do you ask?" "Because Mommy explained that sometimes people make really hard choices to be really happy, and you made hard choices to be with us, right?" Landon looked at Isabel, who had stopped sewing and was smiling softly. "I sure did." "And you don't regret it?" "Not even a little bit." Landon looked around the room, at the woman he loved sewing peacefully in a simple chair, at the brother he had lost and found again leaning over a school project, at the daughter who had turned his entire life around in a way he never knew was possible. "Never," he said with absolute conviction. "Not for a single second." "Good," Ivy said, returning to her diorama with satisfaction. "Because I really like you being happy, and I like living in this house, and I like that Uncle Nolan comes over all the time." Across the table, Nolan looked at Landon and nodded slowly. No words were exchanged, but there was a deep understanding there. The past was there. The hurts, the mistakes, the bad choices, the lost opportunities. None of them had forgotten. But the past no longer defined who they were or how they lived. What mattered was exactly this: the present they were building together day after day. A makeshift, patched-up, imperfect family, but real. Finally, completely real. Isabel, Landon, Ivy, and Nolan now formed a core full of affection and respect. The past was there, but it no longer defined anyone. What mattered was the present they were building together. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the golden leaves of the large tree, and inside the simple house on Maple Street, 4 people who had been lost and found continued the slow, daily, and rewarding work of building a true home. A sunny Sunday at the house on Maple Street. Isabel was preparing lunch in the kitchen, humming softly as she seasoned chicken and potatoes. The smell of home filled every corner of the small house. In the backyard, Nolan was reading with Ivy under the big tree, his deep voice creating different voices for each character in the story. The girl interrupted constantly to ask questions, and he answered with infinite patience. Landon was sweating in Ivy's room, assembling a new bookshelf. The instructions were confusing. Some pieces seemed to be missing, but he was determined to finish. "Darn piece, G," he muttered, consulting the manual. "Landon, lunch in 15 minutes, Isabel shouted from the kitchen. "Almost done," he lied. Footsteps running through the house announced Ivy's arrival, blonde hair messy, cheeks pink from the sun. "Dad, can I paint my bookshelf yet?" Landon looked at the unstable structure, then at his eager daughter. "After lunch. And I'll paint it with you. Promise. Promise." Ivy smiled and ran back, shouting to Nolan about the painting. Landon returned to his work when he heard a car pull up in front of the house. "Landon," came Isabel's tense voice. "Can you come here?" On the porch was his father. Robert Blackwood looked like he had aged 10 years, thinner, with a posture that suggested humility, something Landon had never witnessed. "Hi, son," Robert said quietly. "What are you doing here?" "Nolan told me about your daughter, showed me pictures, told me how you've changed." Robert looked down at his own hands. "I was wrong with your mother, with you two, with myself." The words came out like a painful confession. "Your mother knew about Amanda. She died sad because of me, and with you. I always thought love was a weakness." His voice trembled. "If you'll let me, I'd like to meet my granddaughter." From the backyard came laughter, Ivy trying to teach Nolan how to climb the tree. "You can," Landon said finally, "but we do things differently now." "What do you mean?" "No threats, no control. Here, you're just Grandpa." "I understand," Landon called Ivy, who ran curiously to the porch. "This is my father." "Your grandfather?" Ivy studied Robert with piercing eyes. "You're pretty old." Robert laughed genuinely. "I am. And you're even prettier than in the pictures. Want to have lunch with us? Mommy made chicken." "I'd love to." Lunch was different. Robert was clearly out of his element, but with a genuine effort that Landon respected. Afterward, as promised, Landon and Ivy went to paint the bookshelf. Light blue, happy sky color, according to her. They painted side by side, their hands getting more paint on them than the bookshelf, laughing when Ivy got paint on his nose and he painted a little flower on her cheek. Through the window, he could see Isabel in the garden with Robert and Nolan talking calmly. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was an honest start. "Dad," Ivy said, concentrating on her painting. "Do you like being a dad?" "I love it." "Why?" "Because you seem natural. Like you always knew how to do it." Landon looked at his daughter, golden hair in the sun, tongue stuck out in concentration, small hands working on the bookshelf that would be all hers. He wasn't trying to be a father. He just was. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.